Justin Fields is back for Monday Night Football, and to beat the Miami Dolphins, the Jets will need more than his rushing ability. He needs to have a big game as a passer. Locked On Jets starts now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, September 29th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The Jets are in Miami tonight for Monday Night Football. On today's show, we are going to preview the game. We're going to talk about how a win tonight could be the start of a Jets turnaround. We'll talk about the challenges the Miami offense presents the Jets defense and some of the areas where the Jets defense can exploit weaknesses in the Miami offense. And we'll talk about why the Jets need more than just Justin Fields to run the ball effectively. He needs to have a big game passing. Little programming note, though. This game starts earlier than your typical Monday night game. Kickoff time for this one is scheduled for 7:15 p.m. Eastern. That's an hour earlier than your normal Monday night football game. And the reason for that is there are two Monday night games tonight. There's also a game between Denver and Cincinnati, which starts at the normal 8:15 start time. So Jets-Dolphins kickoff time, 7:15 p.m. Eastern. Just set that on your schedule. This game is on ESPN. The Cincinnati-Denver game's on ABC. So just a little note there before we get started. Now, at quarterback for tonight for the Jets, it will be Justin Fields. This is no real surprise. It felt like we were trending in that direction near the end of last week because Fields began the week as the first team quarterback at practice. And typically NFL teams install their game plans over a 3-day stretch. And when Fields got the first team reps, the first practice of the week, that was a sign that the Jets felt confident he was going to be cleared for this game. And in many ways, this is a nice way to ease a quarterback back into the lineup when he's coming off injury. And it's a nice way, it's good defense to ease your quarterback back into the lineup against when he's coming off the worst game of his career. Because the last time we saw Justin Fields was 2 weeks ago. He had a terrible performance against the Buffalo Bills. His QBR in that game was 1.1. He only completed 3 passes before he left with a concussion in the fourth quarter. Nothing was working for Justin Fields. The Miami Dolphins defense this year has been horrible. They are tied for third worst in the NFL heading into week 4, allowing 6.1 yards per play. And they've been a bad rushing defense. They come into this game allowing 4.5 yards per carry. That was tied for 10th worst in the league heading into week 4. So that matches well for the Jets because the Jets are obviously going to be a team that looks to run the ball. This is going to be a run-first offense. But as bad as Miami's been against the run, they've been worse against the pass. They are entering this game allowing 7.9 net yards per attempt. Net yards include sack yardage. So even if you include sack yardage, the Dolphins are allowing almost 8 yards per passing attempt. And heading into week 4, that is the second worst net yardage per attempt for a defense in the league. And Justin Fields looking to bounce back after a really rough performance. You know, when you game plan in the NFL, you're kind of trying to find the middle ground between what you do well and what your opponent does poorly. In an ideal world, those things would overlap completely. To a certain extent, that's true this week because the Jets are obviously a team that's going to want to run the ball effectively. Jets will run first, second, and third most weeks. That's really what the offense is built on. And again, the Dolphins enter this week tied for the 10th worst run defense in the NFL. So clearly, it's a below average run defense they've got in Miami. But as bad as the run defense is, they are worse at trying to stop the pass. And in the NFL these days, even when you're a run-first team, you are running with one specific focus in mind. You are running to make the passing game easier. Because if you can establish yourself as an effective running team, the other team's defense has to start respecting that. They have to put that extra safety into the box. They have to try and sell out against the run. And that just makes it easier to throw the ball. When you're focused on stopping the run, usually your coverages get simplified. Usually the defense can't get as complex with the looks it throws at a quarterback. If the defense is selling out against the run, it becomes easier to work things off play action. It becomes easier to work the passing game off run pass options because they are so focused on taking that away that it opens up other things in the passing game. And when you're focused on stopping the run, it makes it difficult to key on a receiver like Garrett Wilson, and Garrett Wilson's able to have success. For Fields, we know that he's got the ability to play good games. We know that he's got the ability to throw the ball effectively. In fact, we just saw it 3 weeks ago when the Jets played Pittsburgh week 1. Jets may have lost that game, but it wasn't because Justin Fields threw the ball ineffectively. Justin Fields was very effective as a passer in that game. The issue with Justin Fields has always been consistency. And no matter what happens tonight, we're not going to be able to say Justin Fields has turned the corner, because we already saw him play a good game week 1 against the Steelers, and he followed it up with the worst performance of his career in week 2. The story of Justin Fields this year is going to be a long trajectory. There's going to be a long runway for evaluating Justin Fields, and we really will only be able to evaluate him at the end of the season. What Justin Fields needs this to be is the first chapter in his comeback story. And we talked about this a few weeks ago, how Justin Fields has had 10 games in his career where his QBR from week to week has dropped 40 points. That's been the issue with Justin. There's never been a doubt that he's got the ability to play a high-end game. The issue with him is always that his low games are really, really bad. So obviously you want to avoid a low game today. Obviously you want a game where he plays well against a defense that's struggling, and that would be a charitable way to describe the Miami Dolphins defense right now. It's an opportunity to take a first step, and it will only matter if he continues to build on it. But this is a defense that's built to take advantage of. It's a defense that can't stop the passing game at all. And we know that the Jets are kind of challenged at the receivers spot outside of Garrett Wilson. This is a golden opportunity for somebody else to step up. This is a golden opportunity for somebody to establish themselves as the number 2 target in this offense. We know that the veterans are pretty uninspiring. Do we have much faith in Tyler Johnson after his big drop last week? Well, Tyler Johnson's really not done much in the league. Are we going to have faith in Alan Lazard? Well, I guess Lazard did have that touchdown catch last week, even though he kind of dropped the ball and the officials blew the call on it. But somebody's got to step up. Will it be Mason Taylor? Mason Taylor's off to a slow start. That should not be a surprise. We talked about this over the course of the offseason, how Mason Taylor's kind of a raw tight end the Jets brought in. Tight end's a position where it's difficult to transition to the league. The Brock Bowerses of the world, the Tyler Warrens of the world, they're rare. And those guys are drafted in the first round for a reason. Mason Taylor was a second-round pick. You should have expected a slow transition. But now we're getting to a point where we're a month into his career. And that's not to say Mason Taylor is going to be a monster producer, but there's an opportunity. He's got a few week games under his belt. You want to start to see improvement from Mason Taylor. Can he develop into a reliable option? Can Arian Smith start showing us something? Somebody's going to have to step up. But more than anything, this is an opportunity for Justin Fields. Justin Fields has been a roller coaster ride through his career. And roller coasters mean that sometimes when you're at a good moment, things go down dramatically. But it also means that when you're down, sometimes things rise dramatically. The game against Buffalo was the 13th time in Justin Fields' career he posted a QBR of lower than 20. QBR is like a stat ESPN came up with many years ago. It kind of rates quarterback performances on a scale of 1 to 100. They use essentially a stat that determines how much each play contributes to your team winning or losing. It's a pretty good measure, actually. I think it's actually one of the more accurate judges of quarterback play. And Fields, it's a scale of 1 to 100. Fields has now had 13 games in his career where he's finished with a QBR of 20 or lower. In the first 12 games, 6 of them, he's bounced back with a game of 60 or higher the next week. 60 is good. 60 out of 100, that's a pretty good performance. So we know that Justin has dramatic falls, but he also has dramatic rises. And this is a game that should be tailor-made for him to have a dramatic rise. And I think one of the themes of this game is, in many ways, this should be a get-right game for the Jets because the Dolphins are very bad. But in some ways, the Dolphins are probably looking at this saying the same thing because the Jets are 0-3 and they have not been playing good football either. So, nothing is guaranteed in this game. But on paper, it's set up. And if Justin Fields is going to take the step forward this year for the Jets at quarterback, this is a game where you would expect him to go out and play well. And during the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to talk about a unit that's not playing well for the Jets, and that's the defense. And this Miami offense presents danger in a lot of ways. But there are also weaknesses the Jets can exploit, particularly one of the star players on this team. We'll dive into the Jets defense versus Miami offense as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Every day we make decisions, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss the excitement of this football season with PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Playing PrizePicks is a fun, simple way to add more excitement to football. You can pick more or less on player projections like Josh Allen's passing yardage or Saquon Barkley running for a touchdown, and you're in the game. It's quick. You can make your lineup in under a minute. And PrizePicks just added stacks. So if you want to ride with a player, you can select their pass yards, rush yards, and touchdowns all in one lineup. It's also fun to follow other players in the app and copy their lineups with one click. And this new injury reboot feature, if your player leaves early and doesn't return, it will not count against you. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineup after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. This is not just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula, so you can get hard and go the distance. The effects can last up to 36 hours. That's confidence all day, all night, and even to the next day. The process is simple. Connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. And a big shout out to you, everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The Jets are in Miami tonight. It is Monday Night Football, one of 2 Monday night games. Kickoff time is scheduled for 7:15 Eastern. That's an hour earlier than Monday Night Football usually begins. The second game starts at the normal 8:15 time slot. So just set your schedule so you don't miss kickoff. Jets trying to get their first win of the season against the Dolphins team, trying to get its first win of the season. On our crossover Thursday show last week, my friend Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, I think he referred to it as the stoppable force versus the movable object. And never has that been truer than discussing the Jets defense versus the Miami offense. Jets defense has been terrible this year. The Miami offense has been just as bad, which is a surprise because since Mike McDaniel took over 3 years ago, the Miami offense has typically played at a really high level. And you look at the talent on that offense, it's really tough to believe what a terrible start they're off to this season. There's speed all over the place, but the Dolphins really haven't been able to figure things out. And you get the feeling that this is not just all about on-field stuff. You get the feeling there are some issues in the locker room. You go back to the way last season ended, some of the stuff Tyreek Hill said about being unhappy. Things just do not seem like they are in place right now in Miami. But make no mistake, this is an offense that's got a lot of talent. And the way the Jets are playing on defense, they cannot take anything for granted. There's a lot of speed on this Miami Dolphins offense. Now, I think one of the other issues is that Tua Tagovailoa has just looked really out of sorts this year. A guy who has run Mike McDaniel's scheme at a really high level just seems kind of lost right now, because he's holding onto the ball a lot. Usually Tua is one of the quickest releases in the league. He gets the ball out. He's kind of he's the ultimate guy who plays the point guard role, just shoots the ball out to the open receiver right off the snap. But if you look at the numbers, next gen stats has him about the middle of the pack in time to throw. But he's also got one of the lowest target rates, also one of the lowest yards per throw, intended air yards rates in the league. He's not throwing the ball down the field, so he's holding the ball a lot. And also checking the ball down a lot. They haven't really unlocked the deep game with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It's been really surprising to watch because this offense has good pieces. It's an offense that can do damage. It's an offense that has done damage in the past, but they haven't been able to do anything at all this year. Tua has looked like one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. Well, of course, going up against this Jets defense could be just what Tua needs. We talked in the first segment about how the Miami defense might be the cure for all that ails Justin Fields. You could easily say the same thing about the Miami offense going up against this Jets defense. One of the things that really worries me in this game is Brandon Stevens. And Brandon Stevens is going to worry me no matter who the Jets play, but particularly against the speed of this Miami group at the wide receiver position. Because you saw on the goal line last week, Baker Mayfield saw he had Mike Evans one-on-one against Brandon Stevens, and he essentially checked out a run play. He said, this is an automatic touchdown. I'm just throwing the ball to Mike Evans. Sauce Gardner can only cover one of the two between Hill and Waddle. And the other guy's going to be on Brandon Stevens. And if I had a quarterback who was struggling, if I had a quarterback whose head was spinning, I'd tell him, you've got Tyreek Hill, you've got Jalen Waddle. Watch which one of them Sauce Gardner follows, and you throw the ball to the other guy. And that could be a solution for Tua to try to begin getting out of this slump. I think the Jets are going to have to play more zone coverage this week than they typically do because Stevens can't handle these corners. Stevens can't handle these receivers one-on-one. I think he's going to have a huge problem if he tries to cover these guys. But the Dolphins also have a pretty explosive back who is capable of catching passes. And look, I think the Dolphins are probably using him a little bit too much in the passing game. Devon A-Chain, I think, but he's tied right now with Tyreek Hill for the lead in targets for Miami. So there's no way the Dolphins with Hill and Waddle should have a running back tied for the lead in targets. He's got as many targets as Tyreek Hill. He's got more than Jalen Waddle right now. And I think the fact that Tua is checking down so much probably suggests that he's really out of sorts trying to read defenses. But I don't think the Jets can cover these receivers one-on-one. And while Tua has looked very bad early in the season, he's an NFL caliber quarterback. He's an NFL caliber quarterback who has a track record of success. And if guys are getting a step or two on Brandon Stevens, he's still got the ability to hit him down, to throw the ball down the field and hit a big play. And sometimes all you need is one or two big plays to get going. So how do the Jets stop this Miami offense? Well, first of all, you hope that they continue to function at, not at a low level. But the Dolphins also have issues on their interior offensive line. And this could be a big Quinnen Williams game. This could be the game you look at where Quinnen Williams takes over. Through the course of any NFL season with the Jets, there's one or two games where Quinnen Williams just completely dominates. Now, Quinnen Williams usually plays at a pretty high level. And while he's gotten some criticism for his level of play so far this season, I think he's actually not playing that badly. What we haven't really seen Quinnen, though, completely take over a game. But you look at the issues the Miami Dolphins have at the guard position. And you look at this new Jets scheme. This is a Jets scheme that's different from the one Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich ran. With Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, Quinnen Williams would go to the right side. He'd line up at the right defensive tackle spot on the early downs. And they were very easy to manipulate. It was very easy to get Quinnen Williams into a spot where he was going to be double teamed. With Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilkes, the defense is different. You see a lot more Quinnen Williams playing what's known as the 3 technique, which is the outside shoulder of the guard next to the tackle. And that makes Quinnen Williams much more difficult to double team. It makes it much more difficult to slide the center over and double team because he's lined up closer to the tackle than the center. And the tackle's got to block the edge rusher. So this could be a big, this is the game where you look for Quinnen Williams to take over. And road games in prime time, you look for your stars to deliver. And this has got to be a big Quinnen Williams game. It's also got to be a big Will McDonald game because Jermaine Johnson's out again. Jermaine's missing this game as well. Jets hoping to get him back next week, but there's no guarantees for the Dallas game. Will McDonald, despite the field goal block, we'll take that out of the equation because it was a special teams play. Will McDonald has been really quiet the last 2 weeks. And the Jets have got to get more out of Will as a pass rusher because there's not really much else at the defensive end spot for this team. Michael Clemens is probably going to get some more snaps tonight. He's probably going to take on the starting role. Clemens is Clemens. I mean, you're not going to get anything from Clemens. In fact, I would bench Clemens. I'd put in Tyler Barron. I'd put in Braden McGregor. At least those are some young guys where maybe if you give them some reps, they can start to improve. Maybe they can develop into something. With Clemens, you're not going to get anything. So Will McDonald has to deliver because Jets started the season with only 3 above-average defensive linemen. With Jermaine out, with Jermaine Johnson injured, we're down to 2. So McDonald has to have success going up against Patrick Paul as a pass rusher because, again, Tua is holding the ball longer this year than he typically has. And I think that's a sign that maybe Tua is not reading the field as well as he typically does. I think that's a sign where Tua is maybe a little hesitant. Tua is not trusting his eyes. And we've seen this with the Jets. I mean, we've mostly what you see with the Jets. When a quarterback is struggling, he just loses confidence in his ability to read the field correctly. He gets very conservative and he starts checking the ball down. That brings me to another point. Jets have to tackle better. If Tua's going to check the ball down, You got to get up and you got to tackle the running backs. You can't have games where you're missing 10 plus when you're missing 10 plus tackles like the Jets have had. The last week the tackling was a mess, and you now have Francisco Mauigoa, who's getting his first NFL start at the linebacker position because Quincy Williams is on IR, Marcelino McCrary-Ball is on IR. So you got a rookie who's going to be in there. You hope to see him tackle effectively, but everybody else needs to step up their game. The Jets can't miss tackles to the degree they have last week, or that's going to get this Miami offense rolling. It's going to get this Miami offense out of its slump. So some real opportunities here. I mean, look, I think especially when you look at that Quinnen Williams matchup, Quinnen Williams could just wreck this game for the Jets. But there are some real dangers right here with the way the Jets are playing on defense and with some of the playmakers the Miami Dolphins have on offense. And if Jets aren't careful and the Jets don't tackle well and the Jets don't cover well and the Jets come with the wrong scheme, it could be a disappointing night. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to how it could be a good night for the Jets. In this game, the Jets have a chance to kind of start turning things around in the way the Miami Dolphins don't. And a lot of this goes with what phase the Jets are in of their build right now versus where the Miami Dolphins are. We'll talk about it in more detail as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. They're also very portable. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it everywhere and get that boost when you need it. I don't know what your favorite flavor is, but all of these flavors are refreshing, and they give you the quick lift before a busy day. You got to love how fast it kicks in, and it's sugar-free, so you don't have to worry about crashing later. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in-store and online at 5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. Again, it's 5hourenergy.com, number 5, HOURENERGY.com, or Amazon. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season has arrived, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel gives you so many ways to play. So you can build parlays, you can try player props, and you can follow the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. And taking a look at tonight's game, the Dolphins are 2.5-point favorites at home over the Jets. That line has stayed steady all week. Nothing has really budged it, even Justin Fields being cleared to return to the lineup. The odds makers like the Dolphins. Well, if you like the Jets, FanDuel is a great way to get in on the action. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. On this Monday, we're getting ready for Week 4 action. The Jets are in Miami to take on the Dolphins. It is Monday Night Football. Kickoff time scheduled 7:15 p.m. Eastern from Miami. So just make a note of that. That's an hour earlier than your typical Monday night game. The Jets are trying to get their first win of the 2025 season. Now, one of the things I've been preaching on this podcast is patience. And I know you probably don't have a lot of patience with the Jets. And to be honest with you, you're totally right to not have patience with the Jets. This is a team that has done pretty much nothing good for a decade and a half. And you might ask, why do I need to have patience? The answer to that is simply the Jets in 2025 do not really have the resources that they need to turn it around quickly. And that goes back to some of the decisions they made in the 2 preceding years. And we can have long discussions about some of the mistakes that the team made in 2023 and 2024. But even at the time the Jets made a lot of those decisions, there was an acknowledgement that these decisions would materially hurt the team in 2025 and that the Jets would need to take a step back this year. What you were hoping for was that they would lead to more success than they did in 2023 and 2024. So we have a new coach here this year. We have a first-year general manager. And I think it's completely fair to judge Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji on the first 3 games. And the first 3 games have not been very good. But there's a difference between saying these guys have not looked good through 3 games and saying definitively these are not the right people to turn this team around. Because you don't really find out whether the people in charge are right for you, particularly when they're first-timers, until you have a longer stretch to evaluate them. And in fact, one of the key components of evaluating a head coach is seeing whether he can turn things around when things seem at their bleakest. And for the Jets, I think Aaron Glenn right now is carrying a lot of the history that he had nothing to do with. He wasn't here the previous 14 years. I guess he was a scout for some of that stretch during the end of Mike Tannenbaum's run. But Aaron Glenn's not responsible for the Jets' failures over the last decade and a half. So it's not really fair to expect him to be able to turn it around in 3 weeks. It's not really fair to expect him to turn it around in one season. But at some point, he's going to have to turn it around. And tonight's game has an opportunity to be the first point where it starts to feel like things are maybe moving in a better direction. Back on our Crossover Thursday show last week with Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, Kyle made a very astute point. Is that in some ways, the Jets and the Dolphins are very similar because they're both off to 0-3 starts. They're both really struggling. But in one very fundamental way, they are different. And these two teams are at very different points in the process. The Dolphins are on what I might term the Mike McDaniel farewell tour. It feels like McDaniel's getting fired this year. It feels like kind of the end of the line. It feels like their window to have an opportunity to make noise in the AFC is kind of closed. If you go back 2 years, they were a team that was contending for the 1 seed in the AFC late in the season, then had a really bad finish. They got blown out a couple times near the end of the season. And last year they missed the playoffs. It just feels like Miami's been on a downward trajectory. And it feels like there are going to be changes in that organization in this coming offseason. But the Jets were just beginning anew. And this season's a little bit different for how we evaluate the Jets than it was in 2023 and 2024. For 2023 and 2024, determining success or failure was pretty simple. Could this team win the Super Bowl? Could this team go on a deep playoff run? This year, there are lots of different ways I think the Jets can have success. Now, it would have been great if the Jets were kind of a surprise team that's stuck in playoff contention. I think at 0-3, that's probably out the window. And it's unfortunate because the Jets, if they had just made a couple more plays week 1, week 3, they could be 2-1 right now. And that doesn't mean necessarily they'd be a great team. I mean, they'd probably be about the same caliber of team that they are right now. But it would feel good to steal a couple of wins early in Aaron Glenn's tenure. But I think the biggest thing for the Jets is you want to see consistent improvement as the year goes forward, especially when you have a team this young, because it shouldn't be a huge surprise the Jets were 0-3. Now, none of us were hoping for it. I wasn't expecting them to be 0-3. I thought maybe they'd scratch out a win in one of these first 3 games, but it's not the end of the world that they're 0-3. And you have lots of inexperienced guys who are getting extensive playing time, and that number is continuing to grow because of all the injuries that are forcing young guys to get snaps. Francisco Maui-Noah is one example at linebacker, replacing the injured Quinnen Williams. And the hope is that all these reps start improving these players. Last week, a lot of attention was made to Aaron Glenn dancing after Will McDonald's touchdown. A lot of attention was paid to Glenn's post-game comments that, we're not the same old Jets. And there was a lot of pushback to that. And understandably so. I mean, that's a game the Jets always lose. Only the Jets could come back from 20 points down in the fourth quarter and then lose it on the last drive. And again, fans aren't just judging the Jets on the first 3 games of this year. They're judging the Jets in the context that this is a team that's missed the playoffs 14 straight years, a team that's disappointed over and over. And that's understandable. But Glenn's trying to kind of move this thing in the right direction. Glenn's kind of trying to turn the ship around. And he's trying to establish positivity in the locker room, and at a point where there's not a lot of positivity around this football team. And the best way to change the culture, the best way to establish positivity is to win a game. And I think if the Jets win a game, it could be the type of thing that really starts to turn things around. It's the type of thing that can instill confidence in these players. And I think when you look at like what Glenn did against Tampa Bay, all the stuff that drew media scrutiny, all the stuff that drew scrutiny in the fan base, it's about the players. Glenn's messages weren't to the fans. They were to the players. Glenn wants to get the players focused. Glenn wants the players to think positively. And for a team that's been so bad for so long, I mean, I can understand that. But a win is what this team needs. And if the Jets get a win, the team can start to breathe. There will start to be a little bit more positivity around the fan base. There will start to be a little bit more positivity in the media. And that's the point where we jump off. That's the point where maybe we start to move this thing in the right direction. For the Jets, it's not entirely about the 1-loss record this year. Now, of course, it matters. Like, I don't think you can go 3-14 and say the season was successful. I think, you may say, well, it's about developing young players. Well, if your young players are developing, you're probably going to win some games along the way. Those two are actually pretty well connected. Sometimes we talk about, the goals for the season. We say it's not about wins and losses; it's about developing young players. Well, young players are developing. That's not these aren't like mutually exclusive things. In fact, one's connected to the other. If players are getting better, if players are performing at a higher level, it makes your team more likely to win. So we need to start seeing wins. But the goal for the season has never been about the playoffs. It's never even been about having a winning record. It's about finally feeling like this franchise is moving in the right direction. And the best way to make this franchise feel like it's moving in the right direction is to get better over the course of the season. And getting better is not just about, individual performances. Getting better is also about winning games. And this season is very unique because there are no playoff expectations, because that's never been a realistic goal. This can start to feel like it's turning around at any point. Even if the Jets start 0-3, they get a couple wins here or there, you start to feel like this thing's improving. It can make a big difference heading into 2026. And really, that's the goal for the Jets this year. The goal for the Jets above all else is to start to feel like you've made the first steps of turning it around, because this thing's never really ever gotten off the ground for the Jets. And all the rebuilds they've tried, it never really felt like they made any steps forward. So hopefully things can start to change, and hopefully tonight will be the night that begins. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. Enjoy your game. We'll be back tomorrow to break down what happens between the Jets and Dolphins on Monday Night Football.